A neon sign flickered in the dust-heavy air, its glow casting eerie reflections on the cracked pavement. Joe's last call stood as a relic of an era long past, nestled at the edge of civilization, where the galaxy's outcasts, drifters, and soldiers without a war came to drown old ghosts. Inside, the air carried the scent of aged whiskey and worn leather, a melody of blues humming low from an old jukebox in the corner. A single man stood behind the counter, slow and deliberate in his movements as he wiped down the bar with the patience of someone who had seen time itself bend and stretch. Joe Calloway, once a Marine, now a bartender, had a face carved from battle-worn stone. His hair had long since turned silver. His hands bore the scars of forgotten wars, but his eyes still held the sharpness of a blade waiting to be drawn. He poured himself a glass, the amber liquid swirling as he took a slow sip, listening to the wind howl outside. He wasn't waiting for customers. He was waiting for trouble. The doors hissed open, and silence swallowed the room. They stepped inside, tall figures clad in sleek battle armor, their movements precise, calculated. Zelvar warriors, galactic conquerors, their reputation forged in blood and dominance. Their mandibles clicked in amusement as their black, predatory eyes scanned the dimly lit bar. The leader, a hulking brute with polished obsidian plates running down his arms, stepped forward. His kind rarely spoke, unless it was to issue commands or deliver the promise of death. He glanced at the empty seats, the low-tech decor, the single human standing unarmed behind the bar. This is what remains of humanity's warriors. His voice carried the weight of contempt. A frail relic pouring drinks on the edge of oblivion? Joe didn't blink. He set his glass down with a measured tap, eyes settling on the warrior with the disinterest of a man who had seen far worse. "Drinks free if you put your weapons on the table," he said, voice gravelly casual. The Zelvar let out a sharp, clicking laugh. "We do not lower our arms for inferiors." Joe smirked. "Then you're in the wrong bar." The warriors spread out, taking in their surroundings, their movements slow, confident. One of them knocked over a whiskey bottle, letting it shatter against the floor. The scent of aged bourbon filled the air. Joe exhaled, rolling his shoulders, but he didn't move to clean it up. He just watched. "Your kind has grown weak," another warrior scoffed, running a clawed hand across the wooden counter. "Once, humanity was known for its stubborn resistance. Now, you cower behind tavern doors." Joe leaned against the bar, unfazed. "You ever been in a bar fight, son?" The commander's mandibles twitched. "We do not engage in primitive." "See, that's your problem," Joe interrupted, pouring himself another drink. "All that high-tech armor, all those fancy ships, but you don't know what it's like to get punched in the mouth for running it." He took a sip, savoring the burn. "You don't respect a fight unless it comes in a war." The warriors exchanged glances, their amusement thinning. Joe had seen their kind before, species that believed strength was measured in fleets and firepower, that tactics were only worth considering when written in a military doctrine. They never understood the fights that didn't make history books. One of the younger warriors stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "You would challenge us?" he growled, tilting his head in a mockery of curiosity. Joe chuckled, setting his glass down with finality. "Wouldn't be much of a challenge." The younger Zelvar's claws flexed, but before he could act, the commander raised a hand, stopping him. The room held a moment of stillness, the air growing heavier. Something was off. The commander's gaze narrowed. "You are stalling." Joe sighed, stretching his fingers. "You know, I always like to quiet before things go loud." A soft mechanical click echoed through the room. The doors behind them locked with a finality that made the Zelvar stiffen. Their armor's built-in sensors flared warnings, communications blocked, environmental control shifting, an unidentified field pulsing through the room. Weapons hummed in their holsters, but when one warrior reached for his rifle, it refused to respond. The commander turned sharply toward Joe, his posture shifting from amusement to suspicion. "What have you done?" Joe walked around the bar, slow, methodical. His boots crunched over the shattered glass, his hands slipping into the pockets of his old, worn leather jacket. He stopped in front of Veneer's Zelvar and looked up, a faint smirk still lingering on his lips. "You walked into the wrong bar," he said. The lights flickered. The hum in the air intensified. The Zelvar warriors weren't laughing anymore. The Zelvar commander's eyes darted to his men, their rigid stances betraying a flicker of uncertainty. His species had conquered dozens of worlds, their warriors bred for battle. Yet something about this moment felt off. The quiet hum in the air, the unnatural stillness of the old bartender, the way the shadows stretched just a little too long in the dim lighting. His instincts, honed over years of planetary subjugation, whispered a warning. The younger warrior, still seething from the insult, lunged first. His clawed hand swung in a vicious arc, aiming to tear flesh from bone. Joe didn't move until he did. A sudden sidestep, effortless, like water slipping past rock, and the alien's strike met only empty air. A sharp elbow crashed into the warrior's ribs, the impact like a gunshot in the silence. The Zelvar staggered back, gasping, clutching his side where the plating had cracked. The others tensed, hands reaching for weapons that remained dead in their holsters. Joe exhaled through his nose. "I told you," he muttered, rolling his shoulders. "You're not built for this kind of fight." The commander's mandibles clicked in irritation. "You are outnumbered, human, and your tricks will not last." Joe shrugged. "You sure?" The power flickered again, this time long enough for them to notice. The walls seemed closer, the air denser. Something was shifting. The Zelvar's advanced optics scrambled, glitching between spectrums, unable to process the interference. The commander's brow furrowed. This was not mere human bravado. Something had been prepared for them. A warrior at the back of the group tried the door. It didn't budge. His talons raked across the metal frame, and sparks flew, but the structure held. The younger warrior, still reeling from Joe's counterattack, hissed, "It is just a door." The bartender's voice cut through the room, calm, measured. "It's not just a door." The warrior snarled and pulled back his fist, ready to drive it through the exit. But before he could strike, the metal shifted. Not dented, not cracked. Shifted. The surface rippled as if it were alive, swallowing the warrior's hand up to the wrist. A guttural cry tore from his throat as he yanked back, stumbling. The plating on his gauntlet half-melted, tendrils of something dark and metallic writhing along its edges before retracting into the door. For the first time, real hesitation crept into their expressions. The commander clenched his jaw. "This is technology beyond your people." Joe gave a slow, knowing smile. "Who said it was ours?" A low rumble vibrated through the floor, subtle but present, like a beast shifting beneath their feet. The Zelvar exchanged uneasy glances. This mission had been simple: track the last known location of a retired human military asset, confirm his insignificance, and report back to the Dominion. They were not supposed to be dealing with anomalous architecture, weapons that didn't exist in their records, or a human who didn't react with the appropriate amount of fear. Joe turned his back on them, walking to the bar, casual as ever. He reached beneath the counter and pulled out an old lighter, flicking it open, watching the flame dance. "You ever hear the story of the first bar fight?" he mused. "Back before your people even knew what a bar was." The commander remained silent, eyes scanning for unseen threats, recalculating. Joe continued. "A couple of drunk guys, probably some argument over a woman or a bad hand in cards. One throws a punch, the other throws a chair, and suddenly the whole damn saloon's in chaos." He snapped the lighter shut. "That's how humans fight. One moment, it's all conversation. Next thing you know, the tables are flying, someone's using a bottle as a weapon, and nothing makes sense anymore." The commander exhaled slowly. "You believe chaos is strength?" Joe turned, leaned against the bar, arms folded. "I believe you don't understand what kind of fight you're in." A second vibration rippled through the room, this time stronger. The Zelvar's optics flashed with alarms, their internal stabilizers compensating for the sudden shift. The walls groaned, almost as if something deep within the structure was breathing. The warrior who had tried the door backed away from it, his posture now fully defensive. "Commander, something is." A creak, then a snap, then silence. The commander's head turned sharply. One of his men was gone. Not dead, not collapsed, just gone. His place was empty, the space where he had stood now filled with nothing but a faint shimmer in the air, like heat distortion. No body, no blood, no sound. Joe's expression didn't change. "You feel it yet?" The commander stepped forward, slow, cautious. His mandibles twitched in thought. The air was wrong. He lifted a clawed hand, running it through the space where his soldier had stood, and felt nothing. No resistance, no evidence of a struggle. It was as if the warrior had never been there. The commander's voice was quieter now. "What is this?" Joe's fingers tapped against the bar, methodical. A simple question, really. What happens when you walk into a fight you don't understand? The remaining warriors shifted uneasily, their bravado dissolving like mist. One of them took a cautious step toward the back of the room, inching toward what should have been a safe exit. The moment his foot landed, the wood beneath him cracked, not from impact, but from something beneath. His form jerked, frozen mid-step. Then, as if the floor had claimed him, he vanished, swallowed soundlessly into the ground. The commander turned sharply, his soldiers' discipline beginning to crack under the weight of the unknown. Joe sighed, rolling his neck. "You boys brought armor to a gunfight. But worse than that, you thought guns would help in the kind of fight that's already won before it starts." The Zelvar had stormed countless battlefields, crushed civilizations, watched enemy armies crumble before their superior firepower. And yet here, in this insignificant human bar, they were being picked apart without a single shot fired. The commander exhaled, forcing himself to focus. Fear was an unfamiliar sensation, but he would not let it take root. "You are no ordinary soldier," he admitted. Joe's lips quirked. "Never said I was." Another flicker in the air. Another warrior gone. The last two survivors tensed, their bodies rigid with instinctual panic. The commander clenched his fists. His mind raced through possible explanations, temporal distortions, some hidden weapon, a hallucination, but the truth settled in his chest like a stone. They had walked into a trap they had never been trained to understand. Joe stepped forward, slow, deliberate. "You can feel it now, can't you?" The last warrior's breathing turned ragged. "Commander, we must." He was gone before the sentence finished. The room returned to silence. The commander stood alone. Joe's voice was calm. "You wanted to see if humanity still had fight left in it." He took another step, the floor creaking beneath his boot. "Now you know." The commander's heartbeat pounded in his ears. He had one chance. One last, desperate move. Joe tilted his head, reading the warrior's intent before he even moved. "You can try," he said, voice almost sympathetic. The lights cut out, and the last Zelvar vanished. The darkness lasted only a breath, but in that instant, the commander felt something he had never experienced, displacement. One moment, he was standing in the middle of the bar, body tense, heart pounding. The next, he was somewhere else. His optics scrambled for data, shifting through spectrums, but the environment refused to define itself. There was no up or down, no air or vacuum, no warmth or cold. It was nothing, a void. His body felt intact, but the space around him refused to acknowledge his presence. His claws flexed, but they met no resistance. His breath came shallow and tight. Then, as suddenly as it had vanished, reality snapped back into place. He was standing once more, but not in the bar. This place was different, colder, metallic, sterile. The scent of iron and machine oil tainted the air. His boots clanked against the floor as he shifted his weight. His muscles tensed in response to the unfamiliar surroundings. Then he saw them. They stood in a wide circle around him, figures cloaked in shadows, their silhouettes barely distinguishable against the dim, red-tinged lighting. Not human, not Zelvar. Something else. Their proportions were wrong. Elongated limbs, hunched postures, too many joints where there should be none. Silent, watching. The commander's mandibles clicked as he forced his stance to remain steady. His mind worked quickly, analyzing, calculating. This was not a natural transition. This was a controlled relocation. Something had moved him, something far beyond human capability. Then he saw him. Joe. The old bartender leaned casually against a rusted railing on an overhead platform, arms crossed, watching like a man surveying a job half-finished. The dim lighting barely touched his face, but there was no mistaking the expression. Calm, measured, unshaken. The commander exhaled slowly. "You are no ordinary human," he stated. Joe gave a slow, knowing smile. "Took you long enough to figure that out." The commander turned his gaze to the silent figures surrounding him. "And them?" Joe shrugged. "Call them witnesses." The commander's claws twitched. "You used us as bait." Joe's smirk didn't waver. "You walked into a bar, picked a fight with the wrong guy, and thought that was the whole story." He gestured around them. This is the real story." The commander's eyes narrowed. He had been so certain of his mission, so sure that this was nothing more than a routine assessment of a retired soldier, a formality before his people erased another relic of humanity's past. But now, standing here, his certainty cracked. "You lured us in," the commander muttered. "Not for a fight, not for revenge, but for them." He gestured toward the figures in the shadows. "To show them something." Joe nodded, slow, deliberate. "You." The commander's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Me." Joe pushed off the railing and took the stairs down, his boots echoing against the metal. He stopped a few feet away, close enough for the commander to see the sharp intelligence behind his calm demeanor. "You and your kind think you're the apex. You've spent centuries conquering, wiping out resistance before it has a chance to bite back." He tilted his head. "But you've never been tested." The commander stiffened. Joe continued. "Every war you've won, every planet you've taken, it was easy. Civilizations that didn't understand you, didn't know how to adapt. You've never fought something that didn't play by your rules." He took another step closer, voice lowering. "Until now." The commander's fists clenched. "If you think this is victory, you are mistaken." Joe let out a short chuckle. "Victory? No. This is education." The figures in the shadows moved then, subtle shifts, unreadable gestures, as if they were conversing in a language that required no sound. The commander didn't flinch, but he could feel the weight of their attention, the way they studied him. Joe stepped past him, walking toward an old control panel built into the far wall. "See, your people made a mistake. You thought Earth was just another conquest." He pressed a button, and a holographic display flickered to life. A star map, expanding sectors of the galaxy, marked territories, battle reports. The Zelvar Dominion's record of victories. Joe's finger hovered over a point on the map, the sector where Earth resided. "But humans, we don't fight fair. We never have. And we don't stop learning." His gaze shifted back to the commander. "You came looking for a simple answer, whether we were weak enough to ignore." The commander met his stare. "And what answer have you given?" Joe smiled. "That we're not the ones you should be worrying about." The figures in the shadows moved again, and this time, the commander felt something ripple through the air, an understanding that went deeper than words. This wasn't about humanity proving its strength. This was about something bigger, something that had been watching long before the Zelvar had even learned to walk among the stars. Joe turned away from the map, stepping back toward the commander. "You were arrogant enough to think this was just another mission. But now you get to ask yourself the real question." He leaned in slightly. "Did you walk into a human trap, or something worse?" The commander didn't speak. He didn't need to, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't certain he knew the answer. Silence settled over the room, heavy and absolute. The figures in the shadows remained still, their unreadable presence pressing down on the commander's mind like a weight he could not shake. His body remained tense, every instinct telling him to act, to strike, to escape. But something deeper, something more primal, warned him against it. This was not an enemy he understood. This was not a battlefield he controlled. Joe stood in front of him, arms crossed, his expression a quiet challenge. He was waiting, not for an attack, not for surrender, for understanding. The commander's mandibles flexed as he inhaled, steadying himself. "You claim we have underestimated you." Joe shook his head, slow and deliberate. "No, I'm saying you never even knew what you were looking at." He gestured toward the map, the stars flickering like distant embers in the dark. "You see planets, borders, territory." His gaze sharpened. "We see something else." The commander's fists clenched. "Explain." Joe exhaled through his nose, as if debating how much to say. Then he reached for the control panel again. The holographic display shifted. The Zelvar Dominion's empire faded, replaced by a different set of data points, fluctuations in energy, anomalies in deep space, patterns of destruction that did not align with any known species' tactics. The commander's breath caught in his throat. These were not battle records. These were disappearances. Entire fleets, colonies, worlds, not conquered, not occupied, gone. He stepped forward, studying the patterns. Some sectors had been wiped clean, no debris, no wreckage, no signs of battle. Others bore traces of what could only be described as unnatural decay, as if something had unraveled the very fabric of existence itself. "This," his voice came quiet, despite himself. "This is impossible." Joe didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice carried none of the smug confidence from before. It was calm, measured, heavy. "You ever wonder why the galaxy looks the way it does?" The commander's eyes snapped to him. "Why civilizations rise and fall in cycles?" Joe continued. "Why no empire, no species, ever seems to last past a certain point?" The commander's mind raced. It was true. The Zelvar were one of the most dominant forces in the galaxy, but even they had studied the ruins of others before them. Species that had once been powerful. Gone. Civilizations that should have lasted. Erased. He had always believed it was war. The natural order of conquest. But this. Joe's voice dropped lower. "We started noticing the patterns long before you ever set foot on Earth. Things weren't adding up. Records that didn't make sense. Empty sectors that should have been thriving. And then," he exhaled, "we saw it happen." The commander's blood ran cold. Joe tapped the console again, and a final image flickered into view. A grainy, distorted scan. Shapes in the dark, shifting, moving, massive, amorphous, indistinct. Not ships. Not fleets. Something else. Something alive. The commander's breath came short. His mind rebelled against what he was seeing, what it implied. The Zelvar had fought wars against countless species. They had conquered planets, wiped out resistance, bent entire systems to their will. But they had never seen this. Never encountered anything that could. His throat tightened. "Something's out there," Joe said, his voice almost quiet. "Something older than any of us. And it doesn't care about your empire. It doesn't care about ours. It doesn't conquer." He let the words hang. "It consumes." The commander forced himself to stand straighter. "And you think humanity can stop it?" Joe's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. "No, I think we're the only ones who even know it's coming." A slow dread settled into the commander's bones. He looked at the figures in the shadows again, his mind reevaluating everything. Witnesses, Joe had called them. But they weren't just watching him. They were watching humanity. studying, measuring. Joe folded his arms. You came here to test us, to see if we were a threat. Now you have a choice. The commander didn't speak. Joe took a step forward, his voice calm, steady. You can go back. Tell your people we're nothing. Weak. Unimportant. Easy to ignore. He tilted his head. And when this thing comes for you, you'll never see it coming. The commander's jaw tightened. Or, Joe continued, you can tell them the truth. The commander's mandibles twitched. And what truth is that? Joe's gaze locked onto his. The humans don't go down easy. The silence stretched between them. For the first time, the commander felt something unfamiliar settle into his chest. Not fear. Not arrogance. Uncertainty. Because for all his years of conquest, all the battles he had fought, he had never faced anything like this. Not just a thing in the dark. Not just the unknown threat. But humans. Joe exhaled and stepped back, as if the conversation was already over. Your call. The commander hesitated. Then, with a final glance at the shifting figures in the shadows, he turned and walked away. Not as a conqueror, but as something else. A messenger.